Okay, next up we're going to see if we can get this choke shaft and butterfly installed. As you can see, I don't know what happened to this carburetor, why there's a chunk out of the butterfly, but there is. Good thing they sent me two spare carburetors. Possibility this one could run again. This one here is pretty much junk. You can see the mounting is broke off. Float bowl's been crushed in. But believe it or not, this carburetor had the best parts I needed to repair this one. And that's where I got this butterfly from, is out of here. Not only that, I had the idle needle was broke in this one. It was broke off right about there. This come out of there. So, and believe it or not, the worst carburetor I got for parts had the best parts in so far. Okay, to install this, my indicators for getting in the right position is the solder marks where the screws are soldered to hold everything together. This side has none. This side does. The butterfly is same. You can see where the solder stuck to the butterfly. The back side had none. So when this is in there and everything is closed, you want all that up. Now, to put the butterfly in gets to be kind of a trick. What I'll do is I'll utilize my needle nose vice grips here. And as you can see, the choke shaft is offset in the bore of the carburetor. So the problem you run into is you cannot slide this in over here because it wants to go there. You can't get her back far enough. So what you have to do is the inside has been machined out enough so when you get the choke butterfly down in, it gives you clearance to slide the shaft in. So the first thing I do is we'll get the shaft started. We'll get the butterfly down inside. And as you'll notice, this shaft is slotted all the way. And that's so you can slide it on the butterfly as you put it in. So everything lined up. My indicated solder stuff is lined up. And see if we can get you guys to see this a little bit. Anyway, things are going on approximately the way they're supposed to. And we're pretty close into position. I'm going to lay her down sideways so that butterfly does not fall down on me. And see if I can get this rotated back to kind of lock everything in. Okay, now you can see everything's in position. Screw hole's a little off, so all we got to do is start getting things centered in there so we can get the screws in. Okay, now as you can see, things are looking good so far. So that's why you got to, that's the purpose of that choke shaft being slotted. Like I say, little trick with the screwdriver is get a little grease on the end. Phillips screws helps hold them in there to get these things started. Do have a little Loctite on the thread. They feel confident it holds. I don't all the time, but anyway, holds a screw in position on a screwdriver. Really assists in getting this thing together. Now that we have the butterfly and lever in there, it's time to start hooking up the choke control lever. This system here comprises of this piece, has this tiny piece here that works on the pin. Notice a small hole. The spring goes in that, and there is a small hole in here that the spring goes in there. Then you got a gasket and two screws. This system I'm not a real fan of. Basic purpose of this spring is when the choke is closed, the engine starts, then the air rushing through the throat of the throttle body here will open the butterfly slightly to keep this engine running until you get a chance to take the choke off. Big thing is getting this little piece in here. You can see the slot that goes in right in there, fits in there. Get this stuff so it all works. It's a real pain. Some guys would probably not even consider taking that system apart. If you're not going to soak the carburetor in solution or anything, I'd strongly recommend not taking that out. If you're going to put it in the carburetor solution and stuff to soak it, I would take it out. You're going to get all that gunk in here. You won't be able to clean it out. So that's an option you guys have. If you feel comfortable, all the passages and open stuff necessarily does not have to be cleaned in a carburetor solution. Now there is another style of choke. They call it a solid shaft style. And you can see how all it is a solid shaft. Goes through. And on the butterfly, you have this little spring-loaded flapper valve there. And what that does, as the air rushes through, it'll give enough volume of air to the engine to keep it running until you take the choke off. I much prefer this style over that style. Problem is, most of the differences in all these carburetors are in the throttle bodies. As you can see on the solid shaft, the shaft goes through the center. On this style here, it's offset. So a lot of these parts won't interchange. You'll run into differences on your throttle, stuff like that. So like I say, I much prefer this style over this style. Pretty much all your float bowl, your whole carburetor assembly, it's pretty much identical in all these. The same carb kit fits Caterpillar starting motors, John Deere starting motors, everything. So basically this is the same. Throttle bodies is where you're going to find your differences. Okay, now that I have the differences kind of discussed here, let's see if we can get this thing together. What I'll usually do is we get the gasket in position. Big issue here is trying to get all that stuff. This gasket's getting in your way about 99% of the time. Next thing I will do is I'll put the spring on here. We'll get that installed in the hole, just like that. Then this piece, I'll put on the spring this way. I'll hold the choke closed when I'm doing this. And this is where it gets really tricky, is getting all this stuff in position. Okay, now what this has to be is this has got to be over here, but that gets to be the trick. So now you got to get the little tang on that control lever to be piece there all lined up into here. So we'll see if we can do this on camera. Usually I have to just kind of get off camera, get her in position, but we'll give her a try. Okay, I do have it in position. Now the next trick is getting this back into position. And what you got to do is you got to kind of, works best for me to hold the throttle open now and kind of just pull out. Hopefully this all turns around and get her snapped in. If I'm lucky, I got her. Kind of line the gasket. I'll just hold her in and see what we got, see if it's working the way it's supposed to. I think we got her. I can't believe it's a first time deal here. We'll get some screws started and give her a test. Yeah, you can see how that works. That's what you want to do when your choke is closed. Then you open her up. She all opens. You got a good wide open throttle. Anyway, looks like we got her the first time. Like I say, guys, aggravation right there if you ever want some. Okay, next up we'll seat the little plug in the end of the choke shaft here. Keeps that from sucking air in. And we'll get the low speed jets in. And do this, I just set her up, get a punch in there, and just tap that in. I just kind of go until she's flush, make sure everything's working here the way it's supposed to. It's looking good. Next is the idle jet. You can see the new one is, I'm not sure material, but you'll see it don't have the serrated lines like this one. This is the old one. It's brass. You can see a little bit where it's been tightened into the seat here, a little deformation on the needle and stuff, so we will put the new one in, nice and smooth. But this here will rest against this spring-loaded detent there. When it ratchets, you know we've got a pretty positive lock on her. But we'll see how this one fits. Yeah, she's plenty stiff. You're not going to have a problem with that losing anything. And usually what I'll do, I'll just lightly seat them, and I'll back them off. Usually about a turn and a quarter, turn and a half, half a turn, one turn. We can even go a turn and a half. That'll give you plenty of adjustment to get this thing started. After she's warmed up, you'll have to go through and do a final adjustment on everything, but it should be good enough to get you started. Next up on this rebuild, we'll finish putting the carburetor together and get the gasket installed. Get it on the float bowl, get the top on, and get the screws in. Okay, and just kind of look around, make sure. Looks like everything's seated all real good, seated on there. Next thing we'll do, we'll get this mounted to the throttle body. You know, they had extra flat washers on these. I don't know what the purpose of that was. It originally looked like they had a homemade gasket in here, which seemed to be pretty thin. You can see the factory one is very thick, so I'm going to put this together first without them flat washers. I've never seen one with them on before, but apparently they had some reason for doing it. As you can see, this gasket, how it's got all the slots, that's to make sure that as you have air coming into this chamber here, that it gets all the way around everything. It doesn't restrict anything. Make sure things are going on good here. We're not getting cross thread and stuff. Yeah, things are tightening up just fine without them flat washers on there. Again, remember, these are just aluminum bodies, so you don't need to really over torque these at all. Kind of just do an inspection. From what I can see, everything looks good and square and tight. Then what I'll do, I'll usually do an adjustment on the high speed. I'll turn that in until it just bottoms out. Right there, and then I'll do a turn and a half open. Half, one and a half. Next up, we'll put the idle jet in. Okay, that seemed to go in fine. Okay, that's the finished rebuild on the carb. I think she turned out pretty good. Right now, next thing I'm going to do is going to get her ready for paint. Give her a little paint job here real quick. And I still have the tag to go on. I'm going to paint this before I go in, put her on. But what I will do is I'll just lightly seat the rivet in there. Keep paint from getting it inside. Should be all done there. Next, I'll probably go over, I'll tape off these areas. You don't need to paint on the gasket surfaces. So anyway, that is the rebuild of this carb. I also get the gas fitting plugged up there so we don't get fuel in there or paint in there. So anyway, we'll get her painted up and see what she looks like. Here's the finished carburetor. Give it a paint job. Probably the biggest reason I give it a paint job is I had to sandblast this and soak it in the carburetor solution, which takes all the paint off. Reason I sandblasted this, the whole inside had big flaky pieces of rust and everything. You don't want that going into your engine and stuff. So that's probably one of the main reasons. As you can see, I had the tag off down here and put that on after the paint job. The kit comes with the base mount gasket. I did make the air cleaner gasket up here. So as you can see, pretty basic, not too hard to do. Anyway, after all the stuff I did have to do, clean out the bottom passage. You can see the screw I put in after I took the lead plug out. So anyway, I think this thing turned out pretty good. It should work. If it doesn't, I do have some other options. So here's another carburetor I've done in the past. This is off an RD6. Got that one painted up. It's kind of a spare we have for our RD6s we run around here. As you can see, you look at the bottom, I did drill a couple passages out there, cleaned it out. Another one I sandblasted. This thing here is all cast iron body. Has a big tendency to build a lot of rust when these things sit around. Usually when you find them, looks like they've been used for a bone acre half the time. So one thing about these TU4Cs, cast iron throttle body, aluminum body. You'll usually get some corrosion going in there a little bit. For the most part, not too bad to work on. Hopefully this all helped you guys out, and this is the way I go about overhauling carburetors. If you guys have any little tricks and stuff the way you do it, feel free to comment and stuff. I always looking for extra tidbits to help me out with these things. So hopefully this helped you out.